today, I want to break down the F1 student visa interview process, some important tips for getting your visa approved, and go through some of the popular visa interview questions and the best answers to those questions. Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Martin Uwakwe, and in this channel, I talk about my experiences as an international student, now an immigrant living and working in the US. So if you're interested in content like this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel right now. Before I continue, just want to put this out there. I'm not an immigration attorney, and so whatever information I'll be sharing with you here today is that of my personal experiences and that of people around me. So it shouldn't constitute legal advice, okay? So let's dive straight into it. F1 visa, often called the student visa, is a non-immigrant visa that is governed by the Immigration and Nationality Act, often called the INA, which is the primary law that governs immigration in the US. According to the INA, these are like 5 requirements for getting the student visa approved. 1, acceptance at a school as evidence from I-20. 2, intent to enter the US solely to pursue a full course of study at an approved institution. 3, present intent to leave the US at conclusion of approved activities. 4, possession of sufficient funds to meet the individual's financial needs. And 5, preparation for course of study. So it's assumed that at the point of interview that you've met the first and the last requirements, and the first requirement being acceptance at a school, and then preparation for the course of study, because you can't come for the visa interview if you don't have your I-20. And you can't have your I-20 if you have not been admitted to the school. For the purposes of this video, we're going to focus on the other 3: your intention to enter the US to study, your intention to come back to to your home country after studies, and finally your ability to pay your tuition and living expenses while you're living in the USA. Before I go over some of the popular questions and answers, I think it's important at this point to clearly state that for most non-immigrant visas, like the F1 student visa, the assumption is that you are an intending immigrant. So if you're coming for an interview, before the visa officer meets you, the visa officer has already concluded that this person is not going to come back to his or her home country after studies. So that's the assumption. It is your responsibility to prove to the visa officer that your intention is not to remain in the US after studies, that your intention is to come back to your home country immediately after. So I don't know if that makes sense. So what it means is that you have to prove to the visa officer that your intention is to come back and not the other way around, okay? So what are some of the popular questions that you're going to face at the visa interview? So I'm going to group and categorize all these questions under 3 of these requirements. So we're going to look at these requirements one after the other. So the first requirement is that your intention must be to go to the US to study at an approved institution. These are some of the questions that the visa officer would most likely ask you to know if your intention is truly to go to the US to study. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the visa officers. Every day they interview thousands of people. Most of these people are people who have absolutely no intention to study in the US. For them, it's just an opportunity for them to immigrate to the US. And then once you get to the US, they can abandon school and start working and doing other things. They really want to be sure that you're actually genuine students and you're coming to the US to study. Some of the questions are: 1, why are you going to the United States of America? This is a very popular questions, and most likely the first question that the visa officer is going to ask you. This is the time for you to tell them what school you're going to, what program you're going to the school to study. A typical response would be, I'm going to Lincoln University for my MBA program with a concentration in marketing management. Straight to the point, mention the name of the school and mention the program that you're going to school to study. So the second question would be, why did you choose this university or this program? And in answering this question, it's important to highlight the program's alignment with your personal goals. For example, I chose Harvard University because its MBA program is highly rated in the corporate world, which aligns with my goal to become a management consultant with McKinsey when I return to Nigeria. The third question would be, what is your academic or professional background? And in answering this question, it would be nice to link your past experiences to this program. An example would be, I graduated with a degree in finance from the University of Lagos and interned at KPMG. In the last 2 years, I've worked as a junior analyst at McKinsey, and this has inspired me to pursue a career in management consulting. When I come back to Nigeria, you could decide to add that. Another question would be, do you know anyone in the US? Answering this question, I would suggest that you be very honest while emphasizing your intention to go to the US to study alone. If you have, let's say, uncles or aunties or cousins, you don't have to mention it. It's not necessary. But if you have immediate family members, then you don't have to lie. So a typical answer could be, I have a sibling in the US, but my priority is completing my degree. I've already arranged accommodation on campus to focus on my studies. So you've taken the question away from you having a sibling to emphasizing the fact that you're going to the US to study, you already have an accommodation on campus, and so you're going to focus strictly on your studies. Now, let's talk about the second requirement, which is on your intention to leave the USA after studying. And so some of the questions they can ask you, trying to see if you meet these requirements, would be, one, what will you do after your study? So this is a very straightforward question. And basically what they want to hear is that you have intentions of coming back to Nigeria. But I would advise not to end by just saying, well, you're coming back to Nigeria or you're coming back to your home country, depending on where you're from. But go ahead and tell them specifically what you want to do when you come back to your home country. So something like, I intend to come back to Nigeria to lead a family business, or to manage a family business, or to resume as a management consultant at McKinsey. Another question would be, where do you work? So where do you work? They want to know if you have home ties, because it is only those home ties that will make you want to leave the US and come back, to your home country. Use this opportunity to tell them about the work, that you're doing. So mention where you're working, the specific role, within that company. And also be very careful so that you don't contradict what you've already said in your DS-160 form. Because your DS-160 form, one of the fields that you're going to fill would be regarding your current job and the description of what you do in your role. So you want to make sure that what you're saying aligns exactly what you filled your DS-160 form. Another question they might ask you would be, what are your plans after graduation? The trick is to tie your plans back to Nigeria. So an example would be, I plan to return to Nigeria and work with McKinsey as a management consultant, or I plan to come back to Nigeria to continue in my father's business, or to use my skills and expertise, which I'm going to get in the US, to expand, the operations for my father's business. Another question would be, how will this degree help you in Nigeria? With this question, you want to highlight local relevance. For example, you could say something like, Nigeria's healthcare sector faces challenges like access to quality primary healthcare. So this degree will help me implement solutions that could make, access to primary healthcare easier and better. Something along that line. So you want to localize, the relevance of your degree and how it's going to help you once you return back to Nigeria. Another question I'm ask you, directly is, do you have family ties in Nigeria? It could be, are you married? Do you have a family? Do you have a wife? Be very truthful about your situation. If you're married, tell them you're married. Most likely the next question would be, if you're married, why are you not traveling with your spouse? Okay. So you could go ahead and give them reasons as to, she has a job, or she's in school, or just be truthful about, your situation. And then let's move over to the third requirement, which would be regarding financials. They want to know if you're able to pay your tuition and your living expenses while you're in the US. Studying in the US is very expensive, right? And even for people who are American citizens, most people here actually go out to take loans, for studies, for their first degree programs, master's program, PhD. People take out loans, and the visa officers understand that studying in the US is very expensive. And so they want to understand your financial situation, and they want to know if you have the ability to be able to pay your tuition and your living expenses. Remember, as an international student in the US, you're not expected to work full-time. So you can only work 20 hours a week. And for most students, what they earn while they're in school is minimum wage jobs. So with the money you're going to make as a student, you obviously wouldn't be able to pay your tuition and your living expenses. So they want to understand this, what your circumstances will be. Now, if you have fully funded scholarship or graduate assistantship from the school, that makes it a lot easier. Obviously, it's going to be on I-20 that you have a graduate assistantship or a scholarship. Once they see that, the visa officer sees that, that's a very positive factor, and it makes them, a little bit relaxed, and most likely they wouldn't go ahead to ask you questions around your financial situation. But if you don't have fully funded scholarship, or you don't have graduate assistantship, then they want to ask you, questions like, how are you going to fund your studies? And so you need to provide like very specific response, something like, well, my parents will be sponsoring me. My dad works as the managing director at ABC company, where he makes an annual income of 100 million naira. I have bank statements and fixed deposit documents to support this claim. Or you could say something like, oh, I also have a partial scholarship from this school, and the rest of it will be financed by me. In the last 10 years of working as a executive assistant, I've been able to save enough money to take care of my tuition, while my parents, or why the scholarship will be taking care of my living expenses. So you need to be as detailed as possible about what your financial situation is, and explain reasonably how you intend to go about it. Another question they might ask is, assuming you say, oh, your parents are the ones sponsoring you, and they didn't go ahead to explain or to talk about what they do, then they might directly ask you, so your parents, what do they do for a living? Or what does your dad do for a living? What does your mom do for a living? And then you have to go ahead and explain. The idea is that they want to know if your father's occupation or your mother's occupation will be able to take care of your tuition and living expenses, okay? Another question they might ask is, how did you get this funding? So assuming you have graduate assistantship or have a scholarship, and they might be inquisitive and want to know how exactly you were able to get a scholarship. And so a simple way to answer is to tell them, if it was a graduate assistantship, you could say, oh, I got this funding as part of the admission process. The admission committee felt that I had a good profile, I had good work experience and academic experience, and they needed me to come in as a graduate assistantship, and so they offered me this funding. So go ahead and explain, did you do any interview? Did you just apply for the scholarship separately? Was it as part of the admission process? Did you do anything? Just go ahead and explain to them, exactly how you're able to get the funding. Assuming you have like a third party, uncle or your auntie sponsoring you, they want to ask you, so why exactly is your uncle sponsoring you? Because it doesn't make sense that your uncle, in most cases, would spend $20,000 to $30,000, $40,000 on someone who is not their child. So you want to go ahead and explain, okay, so my dad is late, and this is just an example. My father is late, and since my childhood, or since my father died, my uncle has been the one taking care of all the responsibilities, for my schooling. He took care of my first degree program or my undergrad program, and he's committed to making sure, that I finish this program in the USA and then come back to Nigeria, to do ABC, okay? Make it convincing enough that someone who is not your dad, who is not your mom, will be willing to sponsor you. The thing is, these people are psychologists, right? They are trained psychologists, and they read body languages, and your story, your answers need to make sense to them. Otherwise, you're going to get denied. Let's talk about some of the tips, some very important tips that I've learned, with my personal experience attending the visa interview in Abuja, and those of some of my friends, and also experiences that I've read online from people. Number one tip is, do not be afraid. Avoid stammering or fidgeting. For most people, it's going to be a 3 minutes interview, 3 minutes or less interview, because they have thousands of people to interview every day. And so your first impression matters. The moment you walk up to the visa officer, he or she begins to mentally make a decision just based off your first impression. So you don't want to appear afraid. You want to appear confident. Look straight into your eyes, answer their questions, and be very confident about the answers. It's not a time to fidget. It's not a time to speak slowly or to speak with a lot of fear. They're actually there to do their job, and their job is to approve or deny visas. And the moment you begin to show any form of anxiety, the impression that it gets is that you're telling a lie, or you're trying to cover up something, or there's something funny about your situation. So you don't want to create that impression. You want to tell them that, oh, I'm a student, I'm confident in my plans of going to the US to study, and answer your questions confidently. And one way to do that is to prepare. Because if you're not prepared and then you get asked a question that you didn't plan for, you begin to ramble and to fidget. So prepare, go through all of the possible questions, go through all of your documents, go through your DS-160 form. It's very important that you understand everything that's in that form. And so you're able to defend and explain some of the questions that will be asked. So prepare like your life depends on it, because actually it does. Okay, so another great tip would be do not provide unsolicited documents. So people go for visa interviews with all sorts of documents, and they think that because they have all of these documents that to make their case easier. But the truth is that unlike other countries, like the UK, Canada, where they expect you to submit as many documents as you can, the US is interested in listening to you. They want to hear you speak. They're not so much interested in all of the documentations that you have. And that is why you find out that for most people, they don't get to ask you to provide any documents apart from your I-20, your service fee receipts, and your admission letter. So all of those documents you came in with, do not give it to the officer if you're not asked. You don't want to appear confrontational. You don't want to appear, to be aggressive. Keep all the documents with you, except you're asked to present or to provide any documents. Do not provide any documents to the visa officers. And then the third tip is do not sound too rehearsed. These officers interview thousands of people, and they've heard and seen all kinds of people. Once you come rehearsed, they're going to figure out very quickly that you've been prepared. So maybe somebody somewhere has prepared you and you've crammed all of the answers to possible questions. So you want to be as natural as possible. In fact, see the interview as a conversation, right? A conversation between you and the visa officer. Do not appear rehearsed. When I went for my own interview, I was lucky enough to interview on my birthday, right? And so to break the ice, even before she started asking me a question, I went ahead and told her, today's my birthday. I'm just so excited today. And she was like, oh, happy birthday, and that was like the icebreaker. And the interview took off on a great start, and I got my visa interview approved. It was basically just a conversation between me and the visa office. And it was, chilled, very friendly. I was glad I left the embassy with my visa that day. So you want to be as relaxed, as chilled as possible. These are conversations they're having with you. They just want to understand your situations. You don't want to appear mechanical. The fact that you're watching this video today means that you have plans of going for a visa interview. I want to encourage you, and I want to just ask you to go there with an open mind. Don't listen to what people say. People are going to discourage you. People are going to tell you, the US, they don't give student visas anymore. But that's not the truth. The truth is every day, the US Embassy approves visa to people, but you need to show beyond reasonable doubt that you're prepared to come to the US to study, that you don't have no intention of remaining in the US, and you have the ability to take care of your tuition and living expenses while you're in the US. All right, so see you in the next video, and I wish you the best with your plans of coming to study in the US. Bye.